So the Baltimore Ravens had themselves a solid 2018. Obviously, didn't win a Lombardi trophy, but anytime you can go out and you can draft a rookie quarterback at the tail end of round number one, your long-term starter, Joe Flacco, in his 11th season in the league, gets hurt. You're able to bring in the kid that you were grooming for the future, and you go out there and you win a bunch of games in a row, and you make it to the playoffs behind your young rookie quarterback. You got to feel somewhat good about the future. Even though you had to do a lot of rearranging of the offense on the fly to adapt to Lamar Jackson and his running style, because of the lack of practice reps that he got during the season since he wasn't the starter, Flacco was. But 2018, you could argue, marks the end of an era for the Baltimore Ravens. It's Joe Flacco's last hurrah, ultimately, in Baltimore. He's been since sent off to Denver. Terrell Suggs left via free agency to go to Arizona. That was a real surprise right there. So two guys that have been long-term pillars and standard bearers for this organization are now gone. The Ravens, on top of that, no longer have Ozzie Newsome running the show, which sounds weird to even talk about after all those years of being acclimated to him being the guy in charge. Now it's DeCosta's show. And we're going to see what he can do to try and continue to build off of the legacy of what Ozzie Newsome did there in Baltimore. Well, you saw in free agency, he made some moves. He went out and signed Mark Ingram. Then he went out and signed Earl Thomas. So you're talking about two big names. Ingram certainly is going to add some more depth and strength to that backfield and in that running game. And Earl Thomas, is a guy that can add even more than what Eric Weddle did in the back end of that secondary, with Eric Weddle now being gone elsewhere. But you look at this Ravens team, Earl Thomas was a big signing. Is he going to be able to stay healthy? Is he going to be the Earl Thomas that we've known from seasons gone by? When you look at the draft for the Ravens, you could see there was a big push here for speed and athleticism, especially when you talk about Hollywood Brown, the wide receiver in round number 1 from Oklahoma. Look, you're going to go with Lamar Jackson. You got to give him more at the receiver position than what he had. He needed help. He needed options. He needed explosive, potentially game-changing difference makers. And Marquise Brown, if healthy, could potentially represent that, even though you worry about guys with his type of size profile and whether or not they can physically hold up long-term at the NFL level. You get Jalen Ferguson, then you take other guys like Miles Boykin and Justice Hill, who are speedy, athletic type of guys at their position. So you can clearly tell the emphasis was going to be primarily on helping the offensive side of the ball and trying to get more speed over there, which makes sense. It's just a matter of how much that draft class is really going to be able to help him this year, especially because you figure Marquise Brown still kind of dinged up. We don't know when he's going to be playing at full strength or what he's going to look like in the NFL when he's at full strength. Talking about strengths for this Ravens team, I look at their running game. You've added Mark Ingram to the fold. This should be a team, along with Lamar Jackson, some of the other options they have in the backfield. They're going to be able to run the football, which can help keep you in games. I think their secondary is really good. When you talk about Marlon Humphrey, now you add Earl Thomas into the mix, Jimmy Smith. This is a pretty good secondary unit. And of course, as typical with the John Harbaugh team, you would expect the special teams to be really outstanding. Justin Tucker's arguably the best kicker in the league. Their special teams units as a whole should always be something that you can really count on when you're talking about the Ravens. But they have some notable question marks. I think the receiving core is still a question. Who do they have that is going to be able to be a reliable target, a reliable difference maker in that offense for Lamar Jackson? I don't know. And is Hollywood Brown going to be able to stay healthy? Is Hollywood Brown going to be a number 1 type of receiver? I don't know. You look at that edge rusher rotation, you lose Terrell Suggs, you lose Zadarius Smith. Sure, you've got Judon still in the fold, you draft Jalen Ferguson, but where's the pass rush on the outside going to come from? It feels like one of these things that the Ravens have been tempting fate with for a few years. Is this the year where it's going to catch up with them a little bit? And I think the answer is it very well could. And then you got to look at Lamar Jackson. There's still a lot of unknowns. It's not like he made a ton of starts in 2018. And if you look at the playoff game, the first 3 quarters, he was absolutely atrocious. Now, fortunately for the Ravens, they stuck with him in quarter 4. And he made a few plays and put his team in a situation where they had a chance. That's why you didn't bench him for Joe Flacco, because you knew Joe Flacco wasn't going to be there anymore. You needed to ride or die with Lamar, and anybody that felt otherwise was stupid. Because that Ravens team ultimately was not winning a Super Bowl last year, anyways. And nor do I think they're winning one this year. But as far as Lamar Jackson goes, it'll be really curious for me to see how well he develops as a passer at the NFL level in year number 2. Now, I happen to like him coming out of school quite a bit. He was my number 2 rated quarterback in the draft, ahead of Darnold, ahead of Baker Mayfield, certainly ahead of Josh Rosen. I think he's a little slept on sometimes in terms of his abilities as a passer, but there were times, and you certainly saw in the playoff game, that it was shaky and questionable at best. But with a full off-season program and getting the majority of the reps in practice, I would expect that to work itself out and for him to be better. How much better remains to be determined. Now for the Ravens, I think it's going to be key for them to get off to an early start, hot start, which you could say about so many teams. But you look at their early schedule, 3 of their first 5 are on the road. You got a couple of divisional games in there. You go to Miami week 1. And week 1 can always be a crapshoot. Then you host Arizona, go to Kansas City, and then you got to come back home to play Cleveland. Then you got to go back out to play Pittsburgh. My concern for the Ravens is that they could go out those first 5 games and potentially be staring down the barrel of 1-4 or 2-3. And that's not going to be a good position to be in that AFC North, especially if they're trying to chase down the Browns and the Steelers. And then you look at a middle stretch there in the season that I think could potentially really be damaging to the Ravens. They host the Patriots in week 9, then they got to go to Cincinnati, then they host the Texans, and then they got to go to Los Angeles. Worst case scenario, you got to at least finish 2-2 in that stretch. You got to at least beat the Bengals and the Texans. If you go 1-3 in that stretch, for me, the Ravens season is pretty much over. I look at this Ravens team, though, and I want to believe in Lamar Jackson, and I want to believe in this team being able to do more. But the reality is they have quite a number of questions. Earl Thomas being able to stay healthy is one of them. How much growth and progression are we actually going to see out of Lamar Jackson? How reliable are the pass-catching options outside to where you feel confident that they're going to put your young quarterback into a good place? At some point in time, that defense is probably going to have a little bit more of a drop-off, and could this be the year that happens? Look, I think it's very possible that the Ravens could go out there and ultimately win the AFC North, but I'm not putting money on it. I frankly think that the Browns and the Steelers both have more going for them and are going to finish ahead of them in the standings. So I think the Ravens are going to be 8-8, and they're going to finish 3rd in this division.